sultry August evening to the monthly Dorado Hills Community Council meeting. I wanted to start out, as we all do, by asking for the leadership team roll call. So we'll just kind of go down through the progression and identify the leadership team that's here. I guess John's on the end, so go ahead and start.
John Davey, Planning Commission. I deal with infrastructure issues.
John Davey, APAC Chair, look at development projects in Dorado Hill, provide resident input.
John Heidel, District 1 Supervisor.
Mike Krakow, Representative of Community and Economic Development.
I'm Cindy Munn, I'm Supervisor Heidel's assistant, and I'm the Community Information Outreach.
Very good. And I did find out that Chief Mike Lilienthal is not going to be able to join us this evening. He's been in a fire the last 2 days, so he's trying to get some recovery, R&R time to get ready to go back at it, I guess. So maybe Chief Johnson would like to give us a little bit of tidbit of what's going on with the fire when we get to that point, in Chief Lily's absence. And then, Richard, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Richard Ross, Good Governance.
Okay. With that, I'd also like to recognize anyone who is here who's a volunteer on any of our commissions or committees for District 1. So did you see anybody here? I didn't. So I guess we don't see anybody here to go ahead and recognize this evening, but we want to just continue to thank them for their service. Anyone who volunteers to be on one of our advisory committees or commissions or something that does an awful lot of public service from the standpoint of contributing their time and efforts to try to make El Dorado County a better place to live. So thanks to them. With that, we'll go to item 2, adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Are there any proposed changes from the leadership team? Okay, seeing none, we'll accept the agenda as adopted. Item 3, public comment. This is the portion of the meeting that we always leave open for anyone who would like to come forward and address the leadership team on some item that's not on tonight's agenda. So if you've seen something in the neighborhood, the community, saw something on next door you're concerned about that we're not going to discuss this evening, please come forward to identify yourself to the microphone, and we'll go ahead and take that public comment. So, Steve.
Good evening. Steve Ferry, El Dorado Hills. Last month we had a reading of a letter by the Democrat Central Committee for El Dorado County that spoke about fire issues, and they were going to go to work with the Republican Central Committee here in this area. I don't know that they did or not. I used to represent the Tea Party, which is now, we closed it. But I have a letter that I wrote. I've amended it since, if you read it in the Mountain Democrat, it's changed a little bit from that. So I'd like to read it, take about 2 minutes. When I read the letter to the editor about fire insurance availability, it was again confirmed for me that the Democrat Party thinks that every issue should be solved within due regulation, where I, as a conservative, continue to believe in freedom and responsibility. The problem we have with fire insurance in the wildland-urban interface is that the feds and the state and the county, I might add all controlled by Democrats like the city streets of San Francisco, refuse to do their part in this fire debacle issue. The federal forests are running 300 trees to the acre with very little help in sight. Government's solution to reduce that number is to watch it burn. The state has the same issues and again the same policy. Watch it burn. El Dorado County just passed a weed abatement ordinance, includes trees, which I question as to who has to do this fire prevention work. The citizens, what about the county? Answer, the county can't afford to do its part. Therefore, they will also watch it burn. I hope I'm mistaken on that part. Letting our forest burn our homes down is not acceptable, whether we have fire insurance or not. Homes burning includes the loss of actual lives, the loss of irreplaceable personal valuables, the loss of cars, domestic animals, and all those animals that inhabit the forest. Forest fires in the wildland-urban interface are unacceptable, and Democrats must begin to understand the complexity of this problem and join with Republicans and independents and get on with the job of thinning the forest. There are four parts to building a fire. You need fuel, oxygen, ignition, and regulations that allow fuel to accumulate on the forest floor. The case of the Paradise Fire was state policies that allowed the brush and timber to accumulate on the forest floor. What if a lightning strike had been the cause? We could then say the real cause was that the state building the fire prior to ignition. Thank you. I gave a copy to John.
All right, thank you, Steve. Any other public comment this evening? Joel?
Joel Wiley, Dorado Hills. Just a point of clarification, a point of information. In El Dorado County, it is the Democratic Party, not Democratic Party.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment this evening? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to item 4, our guest speaker. And we have with us Officer Rob Smith this evening. We had some change outs. Lieutenant Matt Stover, who was scheduled to be the speaker, got called away on other duties. And then Sergeant John Mueller was going to substitute. He got called away on other duties. So everybody in the CHP is really busy tonight. Thanks for that. Because we appreciate your service. So Rob, and I understand you have a PowerPoint. So
I do. So I put this together just for some better visuals. Some of the topics I'm going to cover I kind of mentioned in previous months that I've been in here. But I want to just touch on a few things that I think bear some more explanation. So the next few minutes, I'm going to go over a few things, just what we do. Okay, I am the social media officer. I'm on social media all the time, and I see more often than not people complaining. I mean, let's be honest. And say they're complaining about reckless drivers or some traffic-related matter, and a lot of people will respond, we'll call the sheriff. Well, the sheriff has a lot of things to do, but traffic is not one of their primary duties. That's the highway patrol. So call the highway patrol. The sheriff's plenty busy with their own things. So if you call them, those complaints then get forwarded to us. If you want to cut out that middleman, just call for us directly. So, what are all the things that we do? So, I want to explain, because I know this is an issue that I'm not going to get into too much, but we have incorporated territory and unincorporated territory. And this goes the same statewide. In an unincorporated area, such as Placerville city limits, our functions are limited. We can go anywhere within that city and enforce the law, but it's usually just as a passing through basis. Our primary duties then in an incorporated area are all state highways and all state facilities, so state properties and whatnot. We actually don't have any state properties in El Dorado Hills, but in our area, patrol area, we have 20. Cal Fire Facilities, Department of Rehabilitation, DMV. DMV takes most of my time because irate people like to show up there once in a while. So unincorporated areas are different. Unincorporated California is patrolled by the California Highway Patrol, shared jurisdiction with the Sheriff's Department. So all traffic-related matters, every county road is Highway Patrol. Okay, we share that jurisdiction with the sheriff. Domestic violence at a house, Sheriff's Department. Collision in front of the same house on the roadway, Highway Patrol. And then we also show up to a lot of the same things to help each other out. So that's important to know, on top of the state police responsibilities that we absorbed in 1995 when we merged with the California State Police. So our coverage area of Placerville is everything west of that red line-ish. That red line I kind of drew in on the PowerPoint. It's not exact, but everything except incorporated Placerville, which is not actually that big, as you know. So this entire area will typically have 4 to 5 at any given time, and we're split in sectors. El Dorado Hills actually gets more attention than pretty much the rest of the areas, just because of population. So at any given time, we typically have 2 officers within the El Dorado Hills area. But we have sectors 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's split by 49 and 50. So going over some of our collision data, just to give you a rough idea of how busy we are over on this side of the county. In 2018, there were 192 collisions investigated on roadways within El Dorado Hills. That does not count Highway 50 that runs through El Dorado Hills, and it does not count private property like Serrano roadway or Promontory or any of those. We do still investigate those collisions, but it's not part of these statistics. Okay. We did what's called a stat run to get these numbers, and the stat run only included major highways or beats that were within the beat 1, which is this side of 49 and north of 50, beat 3, which is south of, and then line beats, El Dorado Hills, Boulevard, White Rock, those roadways. And then we took out all the ones that weren't actually El Dorado Hills. And that's how many we had in just 1 year in this area. Arrests for our area, we had 1,195 arrests. Now this isn't, we took 1,195 people to jail. This is arrestable offenses, whether they were cite and release, complaint to be filed, or booked into jail. Of that, 142 people were in El Dorado Hills, again on those beats. So about 12% of our arrest activity is here in El Dorado Hills. Winding down a little bit, we went back 4 years for our fatal collisions. And the reason why we did this is we wanted to show some of the problems that we're facing right now. Back in 2015, we had 12 total fatal collisions with 15 dead. Okay, that's only 4 years ago. Out of that, there weren't any within El Dorado Hills proper. There were 2 that were right on the outskirts. I think one of them was Latrobe and Cothran Ranch, and the other one was Salmon Falls and Gallagher. 2 were confirmed DUI, 3 of them were unbelted. Out of the confirmed DUI, some of these we don't actually get the tox results sent to us. We got to go ask for them, and so we don't have accurate numbers with that. I suspect that it's a little bit higher than that. Only 3 out of all of these were not local to El Dorado County. So, what do we always hear? Oh, it's the Flatlanders, right? All the Flatlanders coming up the hill causing all kinds of problems for us. We cause enough of our own problems in here. And unfortunately, we don't say that and acknowledge it enough. In 2016, we jumped up. 18 total collisions, 18 total dead. This was an odd year because we had no multiple fatality incidents. All of them were singles. 2 were actually in El Dorado Hills. Got it right here. White Rock and Stoneburner, and B in Alexandria. 1 was confirmed DUI, and I suspect that it was higher than that. 7 of them were unbelted. And then this year was weird. There was a lot of people that came from out of town. And a lot of those coming from out of town are not coming from Bay Area. We're talking Sacramento, Placer County, Amador County. So surrounding counties for the most part. 2017, we jumped up again. 22 total and 25 total dead. In 2017, we had 3 collisions that were multiples, so 2 died in each. Again, 2 of them in El Dorado Hills. One of them was Lake Hills in Cromwell, right up here. I took that one. And that particular individual was under the influence of drugs. And then the other one was Green Valley and Malcolm Dixon. 5 confirmed DUI, 7 unbelted. Only 5 were not local. So, okay. 2018, we jumped up again. 25 total collisions, 28 total dead, 2 in El Dorado Hills, 50 in Silva Valley, which was a speed and mechanical issue. And then the other one was on Silva Valley at Timberline. That was somebody turning in front of a motorcycle. So, 10 confirmed DUI, 6 unbelted, and only 3 were not from this county. Of those 3, I'm more familiar with 2018. Of those 3, 1 was from Rockland, and then the other 2 were from San Francisco, but they grew up here. So, people very familiar with these roads are dying here. 2019 so far. We're at 22 total fatal collisions with 24 dead. One of them in there was a triple fatal, all from out of town, driving too fast in the rain, and 2 of them were unbelted, including a small child. Was not properly restraining this person. 1 was in El Dorado Hills. That one was the Bass Lake and Magnolia, and that was right there on the edge. I was at that one, it was the first one there. 7 confirmed DUI, there's a couple that are suspected DUI that we have not confirmed. 9 of them have not been wearing their safety equipment, and only 6 have not been local. Of those 6, 3 were in the same car. So where do our big problems lie here with these collisions? And these are just fatals. I'm not talking about all of our DUI collisions. El Dorado County is tied with San Diego County per capita for the most DUI incidents in the state, 58 counties. This is counting all of our arrests, all of our collisions, all of our fatals. Tied with San Diego County. I've worked in San Diego County, that place is crazy. Some of the worst stuff I've ever seen on this job was in San Diego County. We're second per capita, only to San Diego County, in fatals. We can't point to any specific road. We can't point to any specific cause. DUI, I'll talk about DUI in a minute. That is a factor. I don't know why people don't wear seatbelts. I don't get it. A lot of these collisions, like the 2018 numbers, almost every one of the people that were from here were within 10 miles of their own house. That's not far. That's a trip to Safeway from if you're going from one side of town to the other. Or maybe a little more. Typical commute, my commute to work every day is 12 miles. And I think I'm pretty close. Right? So where do the problems lie? What can we do? So DUI is a big factor, and it's not just alcohol DUI anymore. It's drug DUI. They're all kinds of different drugs. I just arrested a drug impaired DUI driver today at Town Center in Latrobe at 10 o'clock this morning. He crashed into a parked car, and he was as high as can be. What's the excuse for that? Now, he wasn't local. He was passing through. He didn't even know he thought he was in Tracy. Yeah. I got to be with that gentleman today for about 4 hours. But how do we know the DUI? So alcohol, it's easy, right? Take the breathalyzer. We all know what the number is, right? And boom, open shut case, right? What about drugs? So, especially with marijuana. Marijuana is a big thing now. It's getting worse. And we have a society right now that believes that marijuana is the cure-all drug. It cures everything that ails you. I'm not going to say that it might not help some people in some ways, but it is not a magic drug, and it's not safe. It's not safe to use and get behind the wheel of a vehicle. I can tell you that not only from training, but a lot of experience. Been doing this job for 16 years. I've been a drug recognition expert instructor for 7 of those 16, and a drug recognition expert for 11 of those 16. And I've seen a lot of it, and it's getting worse out there. People have no qualms about smoking marijuana in their car while they're driving. Well, I have a recommendation from a doctor officer. They don't have a prescription because the doctors are not allowed to get prescriptions. They're recommendations. They get behind the wheel of the car and they crash into somebody. And then we have to hear the same thing. Well, the doctor said it was okay. Let's talk about prescription medication. Just merely having a prescription doesn't mean that you're going to be DUI. Okay, there's certain prescriptions. You've seen your doctor, the doctor's evaluated you, they've come up with a certain dosage that's going to work with you, and it's not going to make you under the influence. Some drugs, yes, like pain pills can do that. But regular, even anti-anxieties or antidepressants, things like that, unless you're abusing them. But you can get a DUI with prescription medication. Okay. So how do we know these things? The guy stopped earlier, he blew in the breath machine and it was 0. How do I know he's under the influence? So we have what's called the Drug Recognition Expert Program. It's been around for about 40 years now. Developed in Los Angeles, and it's taught internationally. It was developed in concert with doctors and scientists. Everything that the officers are taught in this program has been verified by doctors and scientists. And what we're taught through all of this training is we go through a 12-step evaluation. When we are evaluating a possible drug-impaired driver, and we come to a opinion on whether or not we believe they're under the influence and what drug categories they might be under the influence of. There's 7 different drug categories that are there. We've had that in place for a very long time. Nothing changed when marijuana was legalized. We've been doing it the same way. My first DUI I ever arrested almost 16 years ago was a marijuana DUI. They've been around. They've been out there. We've been fighting it. It's just getting worse. And it's a societal change. The blood test for something like that, for drugs, is a confirming type of a thing. It confirms the suspicion of the officer. We're not looking for a certain number. In fact, there are studies out there that show, mainly from Colorado, because they really got on top of it. There's studies that show that people report that they feel most high, most affected by marijuana when their levels in their blood have actually come back down. It's not when they've spiked really high. It's actually a little bit after that when they've started to come back down. So that's why numbers are no good. It also works in the body differently. It's fat soluble versus water soluble. Alcohol is easy. Known burn off rate, known, pretty well, kind of know what absorption is going to be. It's all constant. It's very easy to figure out. It's not the same with drugs. It's all about seeing that impairment. All the tests that we give, field sobriety tests, are all developed based upon neurological exams that were developed by doctors in the 1850s. They've been around ever since then. Your neurologist, if they've ever run you through one of those full exams, there are several things that they do within that exam that are very closely related to field sobriety tests that we give. All of those tests are developed with those doctors to show the impaired function of the body. Going from there, what are we doing? Okay, how are we trying to help this problem? First is training. I say training in the sense of training officers. Our officers, we have, I'm not sure what our current strength is. We're staffed for, our numbers are supposed to be 34 uniformed out of our office. I think road strength right now is in the 20s, and about half of those officers are drug recognition experts. That has gone up from 6 when I came in 2017. Me being an instructor, I've been trying to push more people into that program and get that extra training. Placerville PD now has several more DREs. We've been teaching just the standardized field sobriety test courses, not only to Placerville PD, but El Dorado County Sheriff. A lot of the deputies have been going through. They don't typically go and handle the DUI arrests, but now they're able to better spot those impaired drivers. So it's taking even more DUI drivers off the roads. And we're busy with DUIs. I mean, we're out there, we're taking them a lot. But there is a lot. It's a problem. It's definitely a problem. So, training, continued training with the DRE program, you have to recertify every 2 years. And you have to show that you've been active in the program the entire time, doing evaluations, and then keeping up on your paperwork, and then continuing training. Enforcement. I don't know those of you that might follow our social media pages. We've posted up recently a couple of enforcement details that we've done. With these enforcement details, keep in mind I mentioned 4 to 5 officers on the road at any given time, regular beat schedule. Those enforcement details, we're adding another 6 to 7 at one time and putting them all in a concentrated area. Our first detail, over 6 hours, we wrote a total of 63 citations, arrested the DUI driver, impounded I think a couple cars. Now, noticing from social media, we always get the couple people that start with the, well, you're just a road pirate, revenue generator, all that. I get it. You don't like the money aspect. One thing about the California Highway Patrol is we get $0 from citations that we write, and we prefer it that way. That's why it's built the way it is. We don't get any money from citations, and then the money that goes to the Peace Officer Standards and Training, which is the state overseer of law enforcement. That money that goes to them for training purposes, the Highway Patrol doesn't take money from them for training. We're self-funded, and it's all through the motor vehicle. So we write tickets for safety. We also have the ability to give verbal warnings, okay, or written warnings. We have several different methods that we can try and get a safety message across, and so we do all of those. We've been putting out a lot of these details. Just did another one this past Sunday, not this Sunday, the Sunday before. And that one was another high activity detail. Not as many tickets that time because one of the officers got stuck with a occupied stolen car for most of the period. So that reduced the amount of tickets. So yes, I didn't write a single ticket. Community outreach and education. So we have social media. It's not just about the stories. Every post that I do on social media, barring the Happy Mother's Day or things like that, and even those I still try to do it sometimes, there's always a safety message included in the post, whether it be a funny post, serious post, whatever, there's always a safety message there because it's important. I really believe in the community outreach aspect. So, not just stories. Sometimes we might put up something up there and you might say, why would they post this? Why would they post this picture of this mangled car? Why would they talk about this person that died driving their car and be so callous about it? Because you need to know the truth. You need to know what's going on out there. There's a lot of things that people just have absolutely no idea. And I could tell you even more about that arrest I made today, but I don't think it is appropriate for younger viewers. There's a lot of things out there that are going on, and we try to let you know so that you can hopefully avoid it and not make the same mistakes. And then sometimes it's just you need the shot. People need it. We have a problem here. We definitely do. We have community events. We go to National Night Out with the Sheriff's Department, the fire departments. We try to go to as many community events as we can. things like this, spread the safety message. But not just that, we also have educational programs. The Highway Patrol administers several educational programs. We have the Start Smart program for new drivers. We have Age Well Drive Smart for elderly drivers. We go to places like Ponte Palmero and we give those classes. We have other types of outreach programs for driving. We have adult distracted driver, not only enforcement, but classes that you can go to. All kinds of programs that the Highway Patrol administers to help with that safety message and that prevention aspect. Every 15 minutes. Oak Ridge is getting that this year. I mean, they always say keep it secret, but everybody knows you do it every other year, right? So they didn't do it last year, they'll do it this year. So we'll be out here on Harvard on April-May time frame, shutting down the road, landing the helicopter, doing the whole thing. And that's a valuable program. And kids remember that. I've run into kids a couple years after being every 15 minutes, and they're like, I remember you. You did the arrest at whatever high school and whatnot, where you came and talked to our school. I remember that. It was a big deal. So, getting out there in the community, talking in schools, even I talked to the criminal justice class right before the end of the school year, just about juvenile DUIs and juvenile justice and things like that. So what can you do? Now, I put this in an order, a very specific order on purpose. First one I want to point out is set the example. Okay, go out there, put your seatbelt on before you start the engine. Right? That should be an automatic. Put the seatbelt on. And then it dings at you, right? If you don't, my truck is really obnoxious. It will ding, 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 and then it dings faster and faster and faster, and then you just can't stand it. Right? And a lot of cars do that. Some don't, but a lot do. So wear it. Don't sit on it. One of our fatals, the guy had his seatbelt buckled and he was sitting on it, so that it wouldn't ding and then it would look like he was wearing it. I don't want to get a ticket, but I sure don't care about being thrown through the windshield. Right? And that can happen at slower speeds. Doesn't make sense to me. Some people drive around like they think they're cool without a seatbelt. I don't get that. But set the example. Slow down your speeds. Okay? To get from one side of the Dorado Hills to the other, how long does it typically take? If you don't catch all the lights. Not that there's a lot. Okay? At the speed limit, think about how long that might take. Now, kick up your speed at 10 miles an hour. How long will it take? Seconds less? Is anything. I can't think of a single reason why seconds would count when you're in your own car. Maybe borrowing the bathroom minutes or something, but not to get too off color. But I can't think of a single thing. It's not going to help you. So what's the point? What's the point? And I think we need to just slow down sometimes in our minds and just realize I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there safe. And I'm going to get there right about the same time, whether I go 90 on the freeway or go 65. I'm only going 2 exits up, right? What am I doing? What's the point? Right? Accountability. Not just for you, but your family and your friends and your neighbors. If you have a neighbor that's driving real fast down the street every day for no reason at all, should your first idea be to call us or maybe we'll have a friendly neighborhood chat? I'm of the mindset that take care of your neighborhood, and when it gets to be too much for your neighborhood, you call us. That's how it really should be, right? Take care of yourselves. Call us if it gets to be too much. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your family, and hold each other accountable for your driving behavior. Lastly, report that dangerous driving. There's several different ways that you can do that. 911 if it's an emergency. Okay? One thing I really want to strongly emphasize. When you call 911, report fast. For example, last week we had a crash. I won't say where because I don't want to end up drawing you right to the specific crash. But we had a crash that looked pretty serious. And the 911 caller called in and said, the driver looks like they're dead. It was a minor injury crash. What does that do for us? If you were in our shoes or in their shoes, and you get a call saying that somebody is either dying or dead, and you have to get there really fast, what do you think? I have to get there. I might be that person that could save their life, and those seconds actually do count in that situation. And now I have just driven really fast with my lights and siren on, trying to get there, clearing intersections, trying to be the guy that gets there to hopefully save somebody's life, to roll up and have somebody, the involved driver, walking around with a little scratch on their face. Please call with facts only. If you don't know, say you don't know. Absolutely call in a crash, because you could be helping somebody out, but only what you know. Don't embellish. It just seems like some people like to do that sometimes. And that's very important for all of us responding, that we have facts to go off of. Email. I'll give you the email on the next slide that you can email to. You can call our non-emergency line, and I'm sorry, that'll also be on the next slide. And then, if you're on Facebook, you can send our page a Facebook message. We take traffic complaints that way. Or just call our office on the business hours phone there at the top. It did change recently. That's our new number. But Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, you can call the number at the top. Anybody that answers the phone can take your traffic complaint, or if you don't want to call it a complaint, your traffic concern, and they'll put it into the traffic log. That log gets shared with myself, our PIO, and then our school bus officer, who's also many other duties that he does. One of us will print that out, and we'll put that in each shift basket. So not only does the shift get assigned to go out and check it out, but then either myself or the PIO, when we go out, we'll go check it as well. I try to make it a habit of going to the locations that are reported a minimum of 3 times. Minimum. Now there's some locations where we'll go out and we'll figure out that it's either a little bit of an embellishment or it's not as big of a problem in that it's like 1 or 2 drivers that are doing the thing, doing whatever it is every day, but then nobody else is really doing it. So might sit out there for an hour and see 2 cars. So, but we'll at least go 3 times, because that's what we aim for. If it's a continual problem and you continue to see issues, and you can get license plates, that's even better. License plates, times a day to narrow it down for us. And we're going to try and actually get out there on those times a day. If you have license plates, if we can't catch them ourselves after going out there a few times, they're going to get a letter from the Highway Patrol signed by our commander, stating specifically what was reported and the different ramifications they could suffer as a result of if they were caught on this. Okay. This email here, 245 CRO, 245 is our area number, CRO@chp.ca.gov. That goes to myself and our PIO, just the same as the traffic complaints. And then that's my email. If anybody ever needs to reach out to me, and I can take traffic complaints that way, I can take concerns, or if you have an event that you would like us to be at, we try to go to as many of those as possible. For such a small office, we're actually a lot more active at community events than some larger offices. So I think that's just a matter of how we view being out here in the community. I think it's important. So, do I have any questions at all? Went through a lot of stuff there. Well, let's go. Sorry.
Question?
Yeah.
Well, first, thanks. I saw you guys on Silver Valley doing some speed enforcement later today when I came home.
We've been hitting that a little bit more.
Yeah. Also, I've noticed a few times, I've seen it on Green Valley Road, and I heard about it on Dorado Hills Boulevard a few weeks ago where you pulled everybody over and do a sobriety check for everybody.
Yes, we recently did, last weekend, on the 27th, we did a checkpoint at Brittany and El Dorado Hills.
Do you need specific legislation legally, or what guidelines? Because I've heard some people complaining that that's a little over the top, or...
Yeah, so, and checkpoints honestly are not about, it's not that we think that we're going to arrest a ton of people at a checkpoint. Checkpoint is about that visibility, that deterrence. Yeah, and we ended up arresting one. We also did it starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was 102 degrees. So there were a few people driving through that had been drinking, were not over the limit, and there were a lot of times where we just all got off the line and sat in our cars in the air conditioning because it was just too hot. But as far as checkpoints go, they have been reaffirmed by the Supreme Court as legal. There's certain things that we have to do, such as having a sign saying that the checkpoint is ahead prior to a turnoff. So give the drivers a chance to turn off the roadway before entering the checkpoint. We also have to announce it at least, I think it's 48 hours in advance, but not say where it is. And then within 2 hours of doing the checkpoint, we have to actually tell the media where it is. Whether the media puts it out or not, it's up to them. Typically, up here, they really don't. But yeah, there's different things that we have to do. It has to be random screening. So we either screen every car, or every second car, or every third car, but it has to be consistent. So that we're not just waiting for cars to go by and, oh, that one looks good, I'm going to stop that one. We can't do anything like that. So there's a lot of safeguards in place. And we actually do a little bit more than what's legally required, just because we don't want to give that impression that we're just out there trying to violate people's rights. We just want to be visible and add to that deterrence from drinking and driving.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Ron Cassidy with Dorado with HOA, and we aren't county roads in there. Is there a highway patrol presence that we could get, or is
I've been out there a few times.
What's that?
I've been out there a few times.
Okay.
I met with one of your CSD people and determined which roads we could enforce on and which ones we couldn't. There's a couple of those county roads that we can't. The older section with all the speed bumps, that one's much more difficult and it's not signed properly. That was the HOA that did it.
Right.
But then the other side we're okay.
Okay.
As far as being residential and the guidelines to be able to shoot radar and things like that. So there was some research that had to be done before we could say, yeah, we can do speed enforcement here.
Was that research we had to do, or research CHP was?
I did.
Okay. All right. The second question is, I'm on Highway 50 at 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's a lot of traffic in the diamond lane passing me, and I was just wondering if you could see them passing, moving into the diamond lane, and then moving back over, using it as a passing lane. Is that acceptable?
No, it's not. So I'm going to hit you from two different ways on that one. One, it's not acceptable being there if you're solo between, I think it's 6 to 10 in the morning. And then it's 3 to 7 in the afternoon. But when that carpool lane is active, the next lane over becomes the fast lane. So if you're going 60 miles an hour in the fast lane and people feel that they need to go there to pass you, because you're supposed to pass on the left, or you're not pass people on the right. If you're chilling in that lane, you're technically in violation of the law yourself. So make sure, and I'm not saying that that's your case, because it tends to back up a lot right here, especially at the grade. Make sure that if that is a concern, because I hear that a lot, that you're not impeding that lane to cause people to go around you. Now, I agree, there are a lot of people that are using that carpool lane solo. We get out there when we can. But that time of the morning also is typically pretty busy for us. Crashes, people waking up in the morning and saying, oh, my car's not here. Come take a stolen report. Or somebody crashed in my fence last night. That's right about 6 to 8 o'clock is when we're getting all of those calls. So we're typically busy with stuff like that. If we're not, we're out there catching speed or carpools. The carpools are kind of hard because, especially with more people with tinted windows, I see you in the front. If I can't see your back seat, I'm not just going to stop you on the off chance that you're solo in a carpool lane. Because then, I could potentially be stopping you for no reason if you had a kid in the back. So we'd rather not take that chance and let them go than to stop somebody and be wrong. We want to be sure of the stop that we're making. In most cases, there's some cases where just the kid was laying down in the back seat. It didn't look like they were there. So,
I commute to Mather 3 days a week, and 80% of the people on the diamond lane are cheap now. About 80%.
there are a lot.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
With schools, 4 schools on Still Valley starting on the next 2 weeks, and the
Wednesday.
schools up in Francisco. Can we expect during an opening week or 10 days of school to see an enhanced CHP presence and enforcement of all the traffic rules?
Yes. It's already in the works. Yes.
Getting back to your checkpoint issue, if people are turning off prior to the checkpoint, doesn't that make you a little suspicious that those are the ones that maybe you want to check up on?
Yeah, but unless,
checkpoint.
yeah, absolutely. But unless they commit a vehicle code infraction, we can't stop.
So you can't follow up if you notice that they're turning off the head of the checkpoint.
We can follow them, but if we don't have a reason to stop them, we can't stop them. Yes, sir.
Two things I've seen a higher incidence of. One is truck traffic, particularly on I-5, where the driver's going all over. And I'm not sure if they're falling asleep. Does that constitute an emergency? You should phone it into 911 to report that?
Yes.
Okay. Then the other one I see is the guy who's doing 95 miles an hour back and forth in every lane, trying to work his way up. Does that constitute an emergency?
Yes.
Okay. So now I know who to call.
Let me be more specific. As you described, they're going 90 straight line. It's just kind of a speeding issue. But if they're in and out of traffic, cutting people off, then
Right.
reckless driving rises to maybe more of a misdemeanor type of a thing. Absolutely. Somebody just speeding, no.
Okay. I've always been cautious not to call the emergency number.
So
But then,
mainly,
you don't know what happens.
like with the trucks and swerving and things like that, possible DUI, absolutely emergency call.
Okay.
And then we try to follow up on those the best we can. If we have an officer in the area, we'll try to get it. We just don't always have somebody that's right there that can get to it. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Saw on the news where the governor is putting money forward for an improved 911 system. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet. Will that, as it's believed to be, will that change much in terms of reaction to calls or response times?
I'm not familiar enough to speak on that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Yes, sir.
There was a thread on Next Door Neighbor a while back. It was started by somebody who was up on Ridge Street. Letting people know that you were doing an enforcement activity on Sophia.
That we were.
That you were doing an enhanced enforcement activity on Sophia Parkway.
Somebody said that we were?
Yes.
We didn't have anything organized. I know that we've tried to go out and give a little attention to the area, but we haven't put a specific detail out there. I know we've got complaints there, and we've been out there with it. But that's the extent of it. Just like traffic complaints. That's another fun one. There's a CHP officer in my neighborhood. What's he doing? Well, he lives there. He's writing reports at home because his kids are gone for the day. I got that one a little while ago. Anybody else? Went kind of a while. So much time. But
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. Can we get a copy of your file and email it to us?
Absolutely.
Because we'd like to put it out there. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item 5 in supervisor communications. There's a couple of things I just want to share information on to make sure people are aware of some of the statistics we're getting. The first one is the county survey. This was a flash vote, is what it's called. Responses to the homeowners insurance cost increases and vegetation management ordinance. So the good news was we had a 41% response rate of people who had signed up for flash vote. A good response rate is typically 10 to 15%, so we had what I'll call considered to be an outstanding response in terms of the question about both the insurance situation and then also the defensible space. But here's the information on the insurance. 13% of those who responded had their insurance canceled or received non-renewal notices. So 13% of the people who responded were hammered basically by either insurance company cancellation or not being able to renew. 55% had their premiums increased up to 10%, so that's not terrible. 23% had their premiums increased from 10 to 100%, and 1.2% had their premiums increased more than 100%. So you hear a lot of stories about 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. That's not what the survey said, but we do have firsthand testimony by various people where their rates have gone up as much as 8 times is one of the ones that made testimony to the county. So it's clearly an issue. The Board of Supervisors sent a letter to the Insurance Commissioner on July 25th. Steve referred a little bit to some of that information. And this was basically sharing the information from the flash vote poll as well as some information was collected by the local Realty Association. So that information went in. Relative to defensible space, 60% of those who responded did not know if there was a fire safe council in their community. So we clearly have more work to do to try to get the information out as to where the fire safe councils are, encourage the formation of new or additional fire safe councils or expansion of the ones that are there. So that's something we're continuing to work on through our vegetation management effort. 71% who responded relative to vegetation management know the defensible space requirements. So I thought that was pretty good because that says that there's a lot of people aware of the defensible space requirements that are in the ordinance and they're starting to do things. 55% have taken most or all the action required. So you might expect the people who are most involved are the ones who respond to these things, but I still thought that was pretty impressive. It's 55% of the people took some form of action to make sure that they had defensible space within their property. 23% reported they had taken no action, and only 2% haven't heard of defensible space. But the ones who haven't heard of defensible space have probably not heard of flash vote either, so it's always that communicate thing. So that's just kind of the summary of that relative to the responses. I did want to also comment on the possibility of 3 different ballot measures being sponsored by the county, 2 of which the board has decided to ask staff to go ahead and prepare the ballot statement itself. And these 2 would be coming in March of 2020, and then there's one in November. But the 2 in March of 2020 are, the first one is CSA 3, which is an increase to support the snow removal equipment up in the South Lake Tahoe area primarily. So a lot of the residents, obviously, in Eldorado Hills and stuff would not be affected by it. They're not part of that CSA 3. What we found is that assessment has not increased for many, many years, and yet the costs of providing that snow removal have gone up factors 2 and 3 over the last 20 and 25 years. So this is a request for the residents who live within that CSA 3 to pay a higher assessment fee to their property taxes for that snow removal. So we'll see how that prospers. It takes a 2/3 vote to get that approved. The second one in March of 2020 is a ballot measure relative to our cemeteries in El Dorado County. This is the Western Slope Cemetery District. We're actually forming zone of benefits is the proposal. And what will be proposed throughout the entire El Dorado County Western Slope would be something in the neighborhood to a $5 to $10 annual assessment in consideration of inflationary and sunset dates for that, but to basically provide revenues to maintain our cemeteries in a better state than they're in now. And a lot of us recognize they have tremendous historical value, but a lot of them are really getting abused and not maintained in their sore state. You're going to try to really represent the history of El Dorado County and respect the people who are buried in the cemetery. So that would be the two items that the county is considering putting on the March 2020 ballot. Everything else had been deferred. It was discussed with the exception of the last one here. And this is the bigger one. This is November 2020 election. That's the election, the national election vote period. And this is a sales tax ballot measure to support road maintenance and improvements for the county. Basically, it would allow either probably a quarter or 0.5% sales tax to be established, provide additional funding for road maintenance. It would be dedicated to road maintenance, but again, it takes a 2/3 vote to do that. Nobody wants to see more taxes, but what the state has done with SB1 and stuff is set up these programs that unless you are a self-help county, which means you have a sales tax initiative to help promote road maintenance, that you're not eligible for a major part of the SB1 funds. So in order to become eligible for it, there's no guarantee of that. You have to be a self-help county, which El Dorado County is not. The fact that we have a 10-fee program and stuff doesn't qualify us for a significant part of those SB1 funds. So we're reviewing all that. The actual ballot measure is being drafted. It'll come back to the board, but November 2020 is when that would be expected to be on the ballot. And the key thing is, how do we maintain our roads if we don't have additional revenue? So that's an ongoing discussion at the board, and anybody who has any great suggestions, so we'll be all ears in terms of what we can possibly do. There's various things that have been considered, but that's a real tough one, and particularly when the state is kind of fighting against you, working against you on these things. So it is what it is.
John, question.
Yeah.
The transit tax failed last time around.
The TOT, transient occupancy tax, yes. Right.
Could that be used as a source for road maintenance fees if that were proposed again as a ballot measure?
There's really no nexus the way the general plan is written and stuff for road maintenance from that. It's really associated with tourism and the promotion of business and economic development. It's really what TOT has been primarily focused on. So the board would have to change the general plan statements that are in there in terms of what the eligibility for those funds would be for TOT. Now, there's other sources of funding that it could be redirected, such as the tribal funds. Those are pretty much open. In the past, DOT has typically programmed a significant portion of the tribal funds to be used for capital improvements for various projects. So we're now starting to look at, is that the best and highest use for those funds, or should some of that, or majority of it, go into road maintenance as opposed to capital improvements? You can argue it either way. It goes to discussion.
It would seem that tourism and economic development would have a nexus to quality road system. And so I don't think it's a stretch to look at that, because occupancy tax, the people have to get to those facilities to pay that tax.
Right.
So it's interrelated to travel. And it might.
It's degree of, it's how you assess it. For instance, we have the Fair Board asking for funds to support the fair activities. I was going to talk to that a little bit here. And they're currently receiving nothing from the TOT taxes. And yet they bring in a lot of revenue from people throughout the county and outside the county of visitors coming to visit our county fair, participating in our county fair. And yet there's no funds that go back investment-wise into that county fair operation to promote it from TOT. To me, there's a direct nexus there. Others are less direct. So it really depends on what you think the most appropriate connectivity between what those funds were intended for and the possible use of them. But there's more asks for use of TOT funds than there is funding. So,
right. Well, it's a 2/3 vote, right?
Yes.
And you know how difficult 2/3 votes are.
Right. Yep.
And it may be a vehicle by which you can get your occupancy tax because if they see it going to roads versus something a little more gray and fuzzy in general, I think you've got to sell the ballot measure.
Right. The problem is the county cannot sell anything.
No, I mean, you've got to market it properly to the voters.
All we
so
can do is
they
educate.
appreciate
We can't market. All we can do is educate. So you really rely on
educate them.
nonprofits and other things to basically provide the information to convince people that it's something they need to seriously consider versus not. So, and we are looking at that relative to the sales tax initiative, what can possibly be done there. What I've asked Rafael Martinez, our Director of Transportation, to do is identify the consequences if we're not able to get additional revenues, and this could be sales tax or something dedicated to road maintenance. What projects do we currently have planned that would not be completed in a timely fashion? One of those is the overlay of Eldorado. That was planned originally with SB1 funds, and it's now moved to the right in terms of the planning, with kind of an indefinite when that's going to happen, as I understand it. And Brian's here, maybe he knows a more specific date. But the problem is we expected to get more funds from the state, and that's one of the first uses we were going to have here locally, and we're not getting them. So where do you find the funding then to do those kinds of projects? And we're always looking for grant monies and other things, but it's a continuing struggle to find those funds. So more to come on that. But those were the three ballot measures I wanted to mention. So Steve, you had a comment or question?
Yes, is the county looking into doing any public-private partnerships that would in fact save a whole lot of money on different agencies and be able to direct those funds into the roads?
We have discussed those with the CAO in terms of trying to establish some. So it's in discussion phase, but nothing has been established that I'm aware of. So still talk. So I would appreciate your support in that, because I'm one of the ones who thinks we really have to start looking at those public-private partnerships in more serious detail how we accomplish these things. So I'm going to move on then to the grand jury report, as I reported previously on the Mental Health System, Mental Health Services Act provisions. This one I want to give you a little bit of understanding of what the Eldorado County Fair Agreement is all about and what's going on there. Again, the grand jury put this report out. The date on it is May 23rd, actually it's May 29th, 2019. But they had 7 findings, and I think this is kind of interesting if you don't understand how the Eldorado County Fair works. The agreement between Eldorado County and the Eldorado County Fair Association is outdated. Many of the provisions are no longer applicable and others are not enforced. So like most agencies, we have an outdated agreement. We're looking to update that. That was their first finding. Second finding, Eldorado County does not appear to have a single point of contact responsible for administration, monitoring, and enforcing provisions of the existing agreement. And I would agree with that too. We have somewhat of a diversified management thing that's not optimum probably. The third finding, Eldorado County holds title to the property on which the Eldorado County Fair Association conducts the annual agricultural fair, as well as a variety of other events. Absolutely true. Finding 4, the Eldorado County Fair Association was formed for the purpose of conducting the annual agricultural fair. Absolutely true. Finding number 5, by delegating to the Eldorado County Fair Association the year-round management of the fairgrounds, Eldorado County has missed opportunities to receive revenue from events held on the fairground property. I think that's probably true. So that's the findings of the grand jury. 6th finding, Eldorado County is inattentive to the Eldorado County Fair Association's management of the fair and fairgrounds. That I'm not sure what degree that goes to, but the 7th and final finding, Eldorado County government has assumed liability for all fair activities and operations without any direct financial benefit. So again, a lot of these agreements were set up many, many years ago, and so they're somewhat outdated, they're not well monitored, so those were the findings. Here's the 3 recommendations they had, which I think are more important than just the findings. The first recommendation, the county should designate a specific department or person that is directly responsible for management of the agreement between the association and the county. That seems reasonable. Somebody who is accountable, responsible for making sure the agreement is upheld by all parties. The second recommendation, the county should decide how it wishes to move forward relative to the fairgrounds with one of these options. A, assuming direct control of the fairgrounds and agricultural fair, or B, continuing the relationship with the association and updating the agreement, incorporating the changed conditions since 2005 agreement, or C, modifying the relationship whereby the association is only responsible for conducting the agricultural fair and the county assuming management of all other activities held on the fairgrounds. So those are the 3 recommendations they have in terms of the moving forward part. And then the final recommendation in drafting a new agreement or assuming direct responsibility for operations of the fair and fairgrounds, the county should look into potential revenue opportunities for the county arising from activities outside the agricultural fair. And that's one of the things I've stressed, because I do think that there is a lot of significant opportunity for revenue. One of the things that's been proposed is things like a motor vehicle park part of it, where you have hookups and people can go and stay at the county fairgrounds and attend events. They have a small section for that, but maybe it's time to look at expanding that and providing that as a year-round resource. And the other thing I'm not sure of is how well the utilization of that facility is. If you look at it 24/7, 365 perspective, how well is that facility utilized? I've been told it's utilized a lot, but I haven't seen any numbers to validate that. But most government facilities, if anything, are underutilized when it comes to those kinds of comparisons that are typical industry standards. But so those were their findings and recommendations. The board has to prepare a response to this, which will have recommendations come from the CEO's office and the staff, and then there'll be a public hearing at the Board of Supervisors meeting where those recommendations are reviewed, and then the board will determine whether they agree or disagree with the recommendations and submit the final response to the grand jury report. So this was just to give you a little bit more insight in terms of how the grand jury operates and what the county's responsibility is to respond to those things. Tim?
Yeah, John, I actually read the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it intrigued me, so I looked into it several weeks ago. It was very critical of the county and very critical of the fair because no one is talking. Clearly, I suggest that when you guys look at it, consider alternative B. One, you don't want the county to take over direct responsibility for the fair itself or for the other things. You have an association that does a pretty good job, but they need to be monitored like anyone else because they are not living up to their revenue sharing responsibilities. Maintenance of that place has fallen far behind, so I don't know what those revenues that the fair group is getting if they're not putting enough back into maintenance. But clearly, don't let the county take it over because, with all due respect, you guys will screw it up.
I tend to agree with you, but I think there's a middle ground where maybe the off-season use administered by the county might have some advantages. But that's an agreement. We really have to get into that discussion and understand what we can do better. Because the grand jury typically is critical of things or they wouldn't be taking it on. But I do think a lot of their findings are valid, and then it comes down to what do you do about it, right? So, but yeah, more to come on that. We'll figure out where it goes, but thanks for the comments. Any other comments on the Fair Association thing?
How is the fair board selected?
They are basically appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and then they have some ability to appoint the other board members that are not appointed by the Board of Supervisors. So it's kind of a mixed arrangement. Like I said, the agreement we currently have goes back to 2005, so it's 14 years old, and there's a lot of things that have changed. But as Tim pointed out, the biggest thing is the maintenance. We're now looking at millions of dollars that would have to be put into maintenance to bring the fairgrounds back up to a usable state because they've just deteriorated because nobody's put money back into it. So the agreement is not really clear who's supposed to maintain it. That's the thing you wonder. Why would you sign up with an agreement without identifying the sustainability or the maintenance part of it? But that's what we have. So, anyway. Yeah, John.
I'm just going to go back real quick to the proposed sales tax measure.
Yeah.
So right now, the reason we don't get that full tranche of the SB1 funds is because we aren't identified as a self-help state. Is there any mechanism to guarantee you that if that passes, we will get it?
No. There's no guarantee with the state on anything.
Exactly.
Make that clear.
Because we were, according to the legislation, supposed to get it regardless.
There is a formulaic definition of what you're supposed to get, okay? But that doesn't mean something can't happen.
It's interpretive.
It's interpretive, and big counties typically have more money, so there's no guarantees with the state. So one final thing I wanted to add here that I thought was of interest, and some of you may have seen it, there was a recent article in the Sacramento Bee that was published on August the 1st, and I think John sent me this. At least this says August the 1st on the printout. That was talking about some Sacramento suburbs are in trouble, others are thriving, and where does your community stand? And I was surprised because El Dorado Hills got singled out in a couple of these. And so under the category of home price changes in the Sacramento region, this is the entire Sacramento region, they picked 5 communities And they talked about the change since 2000. So this is over the last 19 years. How has the home price changed in the Sacramento region? For Arden Arcade, they said it was a 56% increase. For Carmichael, 53%. For Citrus Heights, 63%. For Davis, 89%. And for El Dorado Hills, 25%. Which that really surprised me that our increase in property values, home values, over a 19-year period, according to this data, they have only increased 25% since June of 2000. That I didn't necessarily agree with, but that's what they're stating. The other interesting one was they got into population change in the Sacramento region. And again, these numbers are from, they actually took it back from 1980 to 2017, but the change since 2000, for Arden Arcade, their population has increased by 3% since 2000. For Carmichael, it's increased 31%. For Citrus Heights, 2%. For Davis, 12%. And for El Dorado Hills, 150%. So clearly, if you look at the suburban Sacramento region, El Dorado Hills has had a major growth factor compared to a lot of the other communities around. And then the last thing I'll point out, actually got down to a comparison between El Dorado Hills and Granite Bay. And we all know Oak Ridge High School and football rivalry and everything else, but some of the key things that were in here was El Dorado Hills had a median home price of $655,000 in June, and Davis had $671,000. So Davis had a median home price that was higher, and Granite Bay was $785,000. So Granite Bay was substantially higher in terms of the median home price. But the median household income in El Dorado Hills was $127,000, and Granite Bay was $125,000. So about the same level of affluence, if you want to call it that. And then home ownership rates, El Dorado Hills, there's an 88% home ownership rate, and in Granite Bay it's 87%. So again, majority home ownership, not rentals within the area. But that was just kind of interesting that they took and highlighted El Dorado Hills, of all places, in this Sacramento regional study that included a lot of different communities. So if you didn't see the article, I've got it here and send you a link to it if you're interested in stuff. It's just kind of interesting statistics every once in a while that come out. So with that, unless there's any questions of me, I think we'll go ahead. Yeah, Chief Mo.
Quick questions, just again on the sales tax proposed measure anyways. Has a study been done to find out exactly what that dollar value is here for other bills? Meaning what is the cost of repair of our roads today versus the amount of taxes that would be raised from El Dorado Hills to see what that difference would be to fix roads here versus what's going to the rest of the county?
That analysis has not been done yet. That's one of the things we ask staff to do is to go prepare the analysis, come up with the educational material that will help keep everybody informed, write the draft ballot measure, and then it will come back to the board. I'm guessing probably in the October-November timeframe. So hopefully those numbers will be available. But the one thing we do know, at least from Joe Harn, was that 25% of the property tax that El Dorado County collects comes from District 1. So we have 20% of the population, roughly, but actually over the last 10 years since the census and the redistricting, it's probably more like, I don't know, probably 22-23% of the population, so it's not that far off. But what we contribute, El Dorado Hills, District 1 contributes more in property tax base than any other district does to the county. So, but what it means in terms of road improvements, specifically to El Dorado Hills, one of the things that has to be discussed is whether or not there's designated allocation of some of these funding streams. And there's development agreements to be had with some of the developments going on, and those discussions will probably occur as well in terms of should there be monies kept within El Dorado Hills for the road maintenance aspect of things, not just capital improvement, but road maintenance, because the added traffic is down there. So there's a lot of that to come yet, but I don't have anything I can give you as a report yet.
The sales tax, as suggested, is planted for road maintenance, not for capital improvement, right?
Road maintenance only.
Yeah.
So no capital improvement funds. It's strictly how do we maintain the roads.
Yeah.
And there's a citizen advisory committee that's recommended to oversee all that to make sure the money only goes to road maintenance and not other applications and stuff. So,
On the sales tax as well,
you say that, and I don't disbelieve you say that the county's not promoting the sales tax, but they're putting that out to the voters. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to put out a range of different options to the voters instead of just one option?
We're gonna see what staff comes up with, but what's been talked about is 0.25% or 0.5% in terms of sales tax, one of the two. DOT has calculated numbers of how much money it raises, and it depends on whether you want to try to catch up on the road maintenance or continue to lag behind. The 0.5% gets you to the point you can do some catch up.
But I'm not talking different percentages. What I'm talking about is, like Steve said, public-private options, partnerships, zone of benefits for different areas and so forth. You know, so my taxes are not being paid for roads I never drive on and so forth. You know, on local roads. I think there's got to be a separation from regionally significant roads that we all drive on. And I know that would be a complicated thing, but it gives a presumption to the public when this is our option, this is what we want you to vote on, that in a sense the county is promoting that. And I would rather see a range of options to say, hey, you know, here are the pros and cons for the different options, public, which route would you like to go?
That tends to very much confuse the voting public, is what I've been told, so there's different ways to look at it. Making it as simple as possible is what I think you have to do so people have a clear choice, but we can certainly do some analysis and trade studies to look at what we think the appropriate spot is, but the difficulty is you have to do it countywide. You can't do it as a ballot measure, you have to do it countywide. If you do a zone of benefit, you can do it within zones, right? So that's the secondary approach to this, is try to do it within zone of benefits. But a lot of us still drive roads throughout the county, even though we don't live in those other portions of the county, and it's wear and tear on your car and everything else.
Well, like the cemetery thing, you're doing a zone benefit for that. That's going to be countywide, but it's going to be broken up in different zones.
Right.
So,
well, it exists. The one difference there is there is 2 separate cemetery districts already, but we have to kind of deal with how to deal with those because they would be excluded from the zone of benefit. But basically, yes, the whole county with the exception of those 2 cemetery districts. So there's a lot of different ways to try to address it. There's no easy way to inform people of what it means. That's the tough part.
yep.
The county cannot campaign on any of this. We can educate. Here's the data. But you can't go out and promote based upon other things. So that's why the word promotion is.
Well, I'm hoping they'll have more than just board meetings, but maybe other public sessions, workshops, to, you know, for ideas out there in the community.
Well, DOT has promised to do some of that if we move this direction. So,
Yeah.
and Raphael, as you know, has already done a lot of community outreach stuff, and we'll have to continue doing that.
Yeah.
Just educate. Okay, thank you very much. So let's go ahead to the next part of the meeting. So why don't we start with our sheriff's report, since we had the CHP report. So we have Alex Ward with us here again. So Alex, if you can summarize what's been going on in Elmwood Hills since last time.
Certainly. Hi, I'm Alex Morton. I work for the Sheriff's Office. Currently assigned to the property crimes section and investigations. So I handle all of the property crimes that occur in El Dorado Hills. It's my beat. So specifically, you know, like burglaries, thefts from vehicles, vandalism, that kind of stuff. So I pulled the numbers for the weeks 7/18 to 7/24 and 7/25 to 7/31. Let's see, in the week of 7/18 to 7/24, we had approximately 14 crime reports that were generated in El Dorado Hills. And the following week, 7/25 to 7/31, we had approximately 6. Essentially cut in half from the week before. Those reports range, you know, there was vandalism reports, burglaries and thefts. It also included a few reports for drug-related type crimes, disorders of conduct related crimes, so kind of ran the gamut. From my desk, the kind of the crime trends that I'm seeing, we continue to see issues with vehicle burglaries, thefts from vehicles, particularly in the area of like the town center area, also near the Safeway on the Francisco side. It includes unlocked vehicles, but a lot of those reports also include window smashes. So windows are being broken and items are taken out of the vehicle. So my partner and I are coming up with a couple different things that we're gonna probably put in place to try to crack down on those and try to limit those. So hopefully we can get something going in the next week or two. And just a couple things to help avoid some of those things. Take the valuables out of your car, take them with you. Don't leave them in plain view in the vehicle. I can't stress that enough. Even if your vehicle is locked, we're seeing that the windows are just being broken out. So don't leave those valuable items in the car. If you have to leave them in the car, don't leave them in plain view. Just try to hide them as best you can. What I'm seeing is many of these windows that are being broken and things taken out of the vehicle. The things are the bags or items are just they're in plain view. So do your best to take those items out, and if you can't, just hide them as best you can. Any questions for me?
Can I make a comment? Were you talking about town center and up by Safeway?
Yeah.
Potentially reach out to the merchants or the landowners as well. I have two businesses up at one in the Safeway Center, one across the street, and maybe if you kind of included us. We added in one of our businesses a street-facing camera, and there was a auto collision and someone drove away right in front of our business about 10 days ago.
Yeah.
And we have all the video, and we called it in to CHP, and they didn't seem interested. So we gave it to the husband of the barber said, so he was taking it. But the merchants are doing things.
Yeah, then that's good.
That's by talking to them, they may be able to do more.
That's great to know because and on a patrol level, when a deputy gets dispatched to a vehicle burglary or whatever, they should be taking those steps to look for video surveillance. And if I'm a patrol deputy and I'm responding to a vehicle burglary, I want to look around my surroundings to see where's the camera. And if I find one, I'm going into the business to see if I can obtain the footage.
Safeway's pretty good about their cameras, and because that's why we put a street-facing camera.
Yeah. And we've talked to, with my boss about, putting up for instance, in town center, right on the main drag there, putting up like a license plate reader camera or something. That would be hugely beneficial for us. Or just any type of camera, especially in town center. There doesn't seem to be enough cameras in town center. I feel like there needs to be way more cameras.
I'm not sure.
They're taking them out in town center. That's what they say.
Well, I asked them to reconsider because I don't think that's the right answer. This was the management organization was suggesting taking them out because it costs too much to maintain them. I'm going, no, please talk to our sheriff's department first. I don't know if they've done that, but
yeah,
so they were just going to take them out because they weren't running them or they weren't using them.
I think it would be a disservice. I think we can, with the amount of crime that's going on in town center, I think that it would be beneficial for them to keep those there at least, so we can hopefully solve some of these.
Legally, merchants may be able to do more with cameras than you can.
Yeah, a merchant doesn't have to give me footage.
Right, but to be able to put a camera up where you may not be able to.
Oh, no, you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
Public roadway, the merchant can.
Talking about
private property, you can put up a camera.
Exactly. Talking about putting up a camera for our office to use in town center. That's there's a lot of you guys probably know. There's a lot of steps involved in there. I just go to my boss and say, hey man, that'd be cool to get a camera up there. And it's like, okay, well, it's not that easy, and you guys probably know that better than anybody. But that would be beneficial, and reaching out to the business owners is something that we do also. Anything else?
It's a public-private partnership, right there.
Right.
So you just established one.
And you can do it with or without the property. Property as well. Emergency, okay.
Statistically, how much of a difference do you see in burglaries and car thefts from the gate-guarded communities to those that do not have the gates? Is there much of a statistical difference?
have those numbers with me. That's something that we could put together. We'd have our crime analyst put those numbers together. I don't have those in front of me. I think that they're probably, just from what I'm seeing, because I get all the cross property crime reports coming to me in Elk Hills. There probably is a difference. However, I don't think it's that much. I think you might be surprised. Take Serrano for example. I get a lot of crime reports out of Serrano for vehicle burglaries and thefts.
And it seems to me like it wouldn't be that hard to hop the gate, even at my age. So
No, it's not. But it's
easily hop over. So
and it's not even that. It's the fact that criminal can just, they find an open gate.
Yeah, they follow somebody through.
Exactly. It's as simple as that.
Codes are there to
Exactly. And there's been I have read plenty of reports since I've been over there where people's Serrano gate clicker is stolen out of their vehicle. So those are out there too. So it's not there's not the discrepancy that you might think. Serrano and these other gated communities, they have their fair share.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alrighty.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. Yep. Okay, Chief Johnson, you want to tell us a little bit about the fire that was going on? Anything local?
Sure. I'll give you just a general update. Last Sunday, we had a working structure fire over the Lake Hills area. And so that was primarily an attic fire, about 102 degrees out at the time of the fire. So that was quite the firefight, but the crews limited to the attic area. So that cause we've determined was coals deposited inside of a container next to the home, burned up the side of the home and right into the attic. Sunday morning at 4.
This was a barbecue thing we were taking out?
No, it sounds like it was an outside fire. I think they were outside with like s'mores or something like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Was that in the rural section of Lake Hills or down in the subdivision?
No, it was actually right off of, directly off of Lake Hills. It was on Heathcote Court, or Heathcote Place. The other fire occurred Sunday morning, 4:15 a.m. We received multiple reports of a home explosion. Crews arrived. They did have a debris field across the road, which indicated some sort of blast. The fire is what we call well involved, which is to say that the fire is so well established that we're not going to send firefighters inside of that structure. So we went to a defensive type of operation. Prior to our arrival, apparently the residents had escaped the home and they were transported to the hospital by a neighbor. And so that was early on in the fire. So about 45 minutes to get the fire under control. The fire is still under investigation and will remain so for a little time. That's what I have for you.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Okay, with that one question,
Oh, thank you for that.
Yes.
It's been a long day. I do want to introduce Deputy Chief of Operations, Dustin Hall. He's just started 3 weeks ago now. So you'll see Dustin here at these meetings and other meetings as well. Thank you.
Very good. Welcome, Dustin. Okay, so why don't we just run down the line, start with John?
Okay. You were going to talk about the State Bill 35 and infrastructure.
Right. So one of the things that is of interest right now is that we have a project that was submitted to the Planning Commission, went to the Board of Supervisors, got approved, and then there was a lawsuit filed and it was pulled back. It's referred to as the Diamond Springs Village Apartments. And so it's basically an infill project in a very highly dense area already up in Diamond Springs. But the bottom line is the project, after being withdrawn, has been resubmitted as what I think is our first SB 35 challenge. And that's new legislation the state put out that basically says there are certain CEQA exemptions if you qualify for multifamily housing projects that meet certain criteria. So this was one of the things that came up in the discussion about what do you do for affordable housing, and it was referenced as SB 35 allows certain things to happen with CEQA exemptions that haven't happened in the past. And so this is the first test that I'm aware of on SB 35 that's going through El Dorado County. So I'm going to try to track this pretty closely and just basically understand what provisions of SB 35 were found to be compliant with through our planning department, et cetera, and how this project proceeds because it does substantially take away the discretionary authority the counties had in the past to approve or disapprove or even condition certain elements of a project based upon CEQA. So, like I said, this is the first exposure I've had to it directly. I've read about Senate Bill 35 and its implications, but we'll find out here, I guess, if this project stays on track. Because if this project is successful, I would anticipate others coming after that to use the same approach. So,
Was this where, no, go ahead. Was that the bill that said basically if there was like a transportation mobile center, that the area around it could be differently affected?
that was
than
the
present
second
center?
bill that Wiener had, I think. But this was one that was passed like in 2017. But it says where you're able to build higher density residential units, multifamily, that meet a housing need, that CEQA can be removed even though they're not in a transit center, et cetera.
Oh, okay.
So again, I want to go back and read the provisions of the bill, and it's really up to our planning department to go through and determine whether it's in compliance with SB 35. Does it meet the criteria or not? Because I think there's some subjectivity in terms of the criteria that's established. So I want to make people aware of the fact that this is the first one that's come to El Dorado County. We'll see how this progresses through the process, because it could be the start of more multifamily housings using SB 35 as the provision that eliminates a lot of the CEQA elements, including level of service on roadways. So even though we have a general plan, it talks about LOSF, and then we have a new requirement from the state to look at motor vehicles miles traveled, VMT, vehicle miles traveled. These CEQA exempt provisions relative to traffic would basically make null and void the taxpayers' vote for the general plan provisions that are in there. And Measure E, one of the things that Measure E did was it added the multifamily element to the fact that the level of service. In the past, with just Measure Y, the multifamily element wasn't constrained the same way that the single-family residential was. So I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see how it evolves.
A couple other items. This Thursday we have Planning Commission, and we're going to be hearing Serrano Village J7, and that's that last piece along Bass Lake Road, just south of Bridlewood, between Bridlewood and the lake. I think it's about 65 homes, and so we'll be hearing that this Thursday. And then the Board of Supervisors approved J6. Just next to that goes over the ridge, over to Sienna Ridge, where the new Safeway is being built. And so this is the next phase of that. So I have some concerns on the access and so forth. And also the county hasn't quite figured out what they want to do with Bass Lake Road. So as it stands now, they're just going to be paying for frontage improvements, but not doing any improvements along the roadway. So I've got some concerns with that. So we'll hash that all out this Thursday. We also have another item where they want to add some more CIP projects, and one of them includes the US 50 eastbound off-ramp Bass Lake Road signalization. So and I think that's going to be happening in short order, because they were also conditioned to do that as part of the Bass Lake Hill specific plan, as well as cutting down that ridge, that vertical crest, and realigning Country Club Drive as well. So that's about all I've got. If you have any questions.
I have a hand up for John back a little bit ago, so if I may back up.
Oh, yeah, sure.
There's two words in this that just don't make sense to me. I'm a housing guy.
Right.
And creative approaches to attainable housing. You get down to Senate Bill 35, affordable housing. And neither one of those terms appear in the federal government designation as what housing is. That very low income housing, low income, moderate income housing, and then market rate housing. There is none of this stuff. So what is this?
Affordable housing definitions come from SACOG, and it's related to very low income, moderate income. So there's various categories, and El Dorado County receives an allocation, just like every other agency within SACOG, of what they expect, what the state's expectations are to meet those affordable housing provisions. Attainable housing is a term that's somewhat of a derivative, that people have decided that affordability is a measure that's used by SACOG in the state, which may not be realistic. So attainable housing is what you can actually build. So,
So what I'm hearing is you're telling me the state cog is not using the federal definitions of housing, and the state of California offhand, CHAPA and all that, they are using those terms. So we have an agency out there that doesn't use conforming terms for housing. Is that what you're telling me?
well, I think the very low income is the same, but the affordable housing term is something I think that's unique to California. Other states may have it, but I don't think you're going to find it, as you pointed out, in the federal definition. So it's a state level definition of how they envelope or umbrella what I believe are all those very low income housing elements that the feds talk about. So I'm not an expert in it.
I'll send you a paper about that.
That's fine. Actually, we just had Greg Chu from SACOG make a presentation to our planning commission. And John was there, as a lot of other people, but he was emphasizing, I think, that the affordability of housing and various other things as part of that, and some of the changes that are coming down in Sequel. So yeah, send me whatever you want. I can send you what we're getting from SACOG, because that's what we have to respond to in California primarily.
But what I do like coming out of SACOG is Greg said this at a housing seminar we had last year for some of those who attended that. He was of the opinion, instead of some of this draconian stuff that's coming down from the state, he'd rather work with the county to have the county help solve its own housing problems. So he's got that kind of attitude coming in, which is, I appreciate very much. So.
Yeah, in SB 35, I just went back and looked at a little bit of the definition. It applies when a county or city has been unable to meet their housing allocations. The regional housing needs analysis and allocations, when they've been unable to meet it, is when SB 35 applies. So it is a Wiener bill that was passed in 2016, and it's just now starting to hit the ground in terms of implementation. But it basically says when you have municipalities that have not met their assigned housing needs quotas, they've designated where they can be built, but they haven't built them, and SB 35 can prevail presumably. So I don't know what kind of a legal discussion this leads you into, but that's kind of the provisions that are in here.
And I know our county council's in the middle of all that, negotiations on that project in particular in Diamond Springs. So.
Right. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and move down the line. And John, you want to summarize what exit going on?
Well, real quick. So that's John's favorite term. We're probably looking at, we're going to cancel the meeting next Wednesday in as much as that there are no new projects going on that merit having a meeting and having a further discussion. Barring anything miraculous happening Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll probably send that notice out of cancellation on Wednesday. There are several projects that are pending. There are several projects that are moving forward that are big transformational type of projects that we've talked to developers about, but they're not ready to present to the county and the public at this point yet. So, with that said, I'll go real quick. At our meeting last month, real quick, we discussed Costco, some changes they've suggested in terms of moving the warehouse across the Silver Parkway to the west side of the development alongside their fuel station. They're looking at some underground parking, which is the first time they've ever done it in the United States. They've done it in Mexico and they've done it in Asia. We had a lot of discussion about some design elements. We talked about traffic challenges. We talked about the approvals process, basically how the draft environmental impact report will come out. There'll be a scoping meeting prior to that, and the final environmental impact report. We also discussed that there's potentially, they might look at something like a development agreement to enhance a project or to grant some things maybe the county's looking for, that they're willing to accommodate to get the project approved. But the other thing that we looked at with Costco was the fact that Costco is only a part of the EDH 52 project on both sides of the highway there, or both sides of the Silver Parkway, and that their goal is to present both projects, Costco and the balance of the project, as one unit for environmental review. It saves dollars, and it really does present to the community, here are the cumulative impacts of multiple projects in one area. So we had that discussion. That was the majority of our meeting. We also talked about the EID moving the Bass Lake maintenance facility to Latrobe Road to the water treatment facility, and that's primarily because they're looking to sell that Bass Lake property to Dorado CSD, who wants to use it as part of their park project up there. There are some level of service issues that are probably being mitigated by fees, essentially. So we talked about that. That's conditional use permit. We had an item. We talked about a front setback variance for an individual residence, which was a request from the county, from the planning staff, and we didn't quite understand why they wanted us to discuss it, but we let everybody know that it's a thing. So typically, APAC looks at development projects, not individual homeowner projects. And then we had a quick update for Santa Ridge, the commercial center there, where the Safeway anchored the project at Bass Lake Road and Toronto Parkway very quickly. Safeway, 50,000 square foot store with 3,000 square foot convenience mart. Chase Bank, probably with the drive-through. Pacific Dental Services. Fresh Cleaners, which is a dry cleaner. Nail Retreat Salon. Park Avenue will be added to a second location on Dorado Hills. Great Clips will be adding their second location on Dorado Hills. Mexico Lindo is a restaurant that's based in San Jose. This will be their second location. Sourdough Company is adding their third Dorado Hills locations. John and Bond's Yogurt Shop, which is a Chico-based yogurt and ice cream restaurant. They'll be there. And then Safeway is looking right now at opening in late 2019 or 2020. And those balances of those other businesses will start opening in the second quarter of 2020. And the very last thing that we did, we updated the status on the Saratoga Retail Phase 2. Essentially, there was a notice of decision by the Director of Planning that some design elements or design review that they were submitting was substantially in compliance with the approved project from 2018. Basically, they're eliminating the Chick-fil-A, which is very contentious. There's a threat of a lawsuit. The developer worked with residents in the area, and they came to an agreement to basically eliminate 2 drive-through lanes to a single drive-through lane, and converting that third building to a multi-tenant building instead of one big building for Chick-fil-A. The window to provide comment on that or to appeal that decision closed in mid-July. So it looks like right now that project will be moving forward. So, as I mentioned, we have a lot of projects that are pending, ready to go, a lot of old projects that are just starting to come to realization now as the economy's changed. So what we'll be talking in September, I believe we're looking at trying to have the Capital Southeast Connector, JPA, one of the representatives come and talk about the White Rock Road, moving out 4 lanes from the county line into about to Latrobe, and then we've also heard from the Vineyards project in Dorado Hills that they might want to come back and have additional discussion. We've already we've already submitted our findings from our subcommittee on their draft environmental impact report. So those are things we're looking at in September, unless some big other projects spring to life. That's what we'll be talking about. And that's it.
Very good, thank you. Sure.
Good governance. John had indicated comments about the ballot measures, and he obviously filled in the blanks quite a bit about that. It prompted me to take a look at the county's website regarding elections, and initially I anticipated seeing something about the sales tax thing, but that's still moving forward.
Right.
There is one item presently on the ballot for one of the districts, but what was kind of interesting to me is you couldn't find any information as to the substance of it. It was just a title, and it will be on the August 27th election. And it struck me that the elections office really ought to have information available to the public about a particular measure, or if it's there, how it is linked to. And it kind of goes to me transparency. If there's going to be something. Now, this particular ballot measure doesn't impact upon El Dorado Hills, it impacts upon Camino, but it relates to fire protection, which I think might be an interesting item to know what one of the other fire districts is doing for education purposes. And it struck me that maybe the elections office, in consultation with the county, could identify the matters that are actually going to be on the ballot. And if these March 2020 items are existent already, then why not have a calendar showing things that would be coming up and what they would be about? To me, that would be just good education for those citizens who would want to be able to inquire. I think that's an important thing. And then, as an aside, which actually I learned at the last fire board meeting, was that our own fire department was impeded somewhat by the assessor's office inability to provide accurate information as to parcel numbers and ownership addresses, and how in some ways I believe that impacted our ability to enforce some of the weed abatement. Thanks, Chief. So I mentioned this to John, and he became more aware of it. But once again, it goes to being aware of what goes right in the county and maybe what needs to be improved in the county, and getting that information fed back and dealt with. And I think that definitely all goes to good governance.
Totally agree. So with respect to the elections department, I went by there today because I was also looking for information on the March 3rd, 2020 candidate calendar. There's nothing on the website. We're upgrading the website. It's been delayed because of various things. They said it's going to be out there next week, so I would ask you to go back and look, because evidently it's gotten behind in terms of the maintenance on it. But I was surprised that the candidate period for the March 2020 election doesn't open until November the 11th, and it closes on December 6th. So this is for the March 2020. So, for instance, in my situation, since I'm running for re-election, I can't actually go to the department and start registering until November the 11th. I can start collecting signatures in lieu of fees starting September 12th. But these dates, I think, are, and there's various other boards and stuff that are on here, but they promised me they would be on there hopefully by the end of this week, first part of next week. They're just behind. So this is information they normally put out there, but today it wasn't there. So, and if anybody's interested in looking at this, I got a copy of the calendar here. You're welcome to look at it for candidacies relative to March election process. The November one isn't out yet.
Which elected official is responsible for the elections?
Registrar of voters?
Registrar of voters?
Right.
He's an elected official, right?
No, he's appointed by the board.
Appointed by
He used to be, Bill Schultz had multiple
That's
jobs.
Bill Schultz did. Okay.
He was recorder clerk, but he also accepted responsibility of registrar of voters. But since he has retired, the registrar of voters was appointed as a separate individual. Bill O'Neill is the gentleman's name. So, okay. And with respect to the number of abatements that you couldn't get the accurate addresses on, what Richard was remembering was like 50. I've heard of a couple, but a 50 is a major consideration. They do have the old database, so if that hasn't been resolved, I guess I'd like to know why it hasn't been resolved.
I think a lot has to do with the new system the county went to.
Right.
The dates are, the date that they've updated all their files is about 6 to 8 months behind. So when we send all those letters out to prospective or those owners, it turns out they've got a property transfer and it hasn't been updated in the county's rules yet, which means that we have to pull all those letters off and we can't force them.
So Megabyte's the name of the new system, and this is the first time I've heard that kind of a serious situation. And we have 3 people who are elected officials responsible for that implementation, but evidently they're not telling the board about these kind of things. So that's kind of disappointing. But I'm going to ask some questions.
Sure, the same 3 that were in the last grand jury report said that nobody was tracking the implementation of the system.
I believe that's correct. But so I'm going to try to find out why that information is available, because it should be in the old database, even when they make the transition. So if it's a transition thing, that's one thing, but if the data got held up for 6 months,
I think it has to do with
to make the migration.
It's probably the migration, or they don't want to enter the new data in the old database, but haven't got to the new one yet. And so those addresses or those transfers, they're just 6 to 8 months behind. And so when you look at that, there's a lot of transfers that happen, and we don't know about that. So we'll send a letter and we'll get a bounce back. It's literally a stack of 50. And so either we abate them, and it's at our cost because we abated that as a different owner, or we don't abate them at all, we have to hire a rep in the community. So it's kind of the dilemma we're in. We're working with title companies right now. It's kind of a workaround because they seem to be about 2 weeks, which is reasonable.
Okay, well, if you're getting the answers, that's the important thing, but I am going to have a discussion with the CAO about what's going on there. Because we only find out about these implementation issues through the public. I don't know why that's the case, but nobody likes to talk about it, so very rarely do we find out through staff that there's implementation issues, but I guess. So, moving right along, let's go to our report on the economic development plan.
I'd like to give you a bunch of issues in the computer system in the building department. That conversation.
Yeah, I'm having those conversations.
We're under construction.
Under ongoing, yes.
As far as community and economic development, not a whole lot going on, honestly. Our meeting this week in Tahoe, our annual pilgrimage to visit with them, has been canceled because of lack of a quorum, regrettably. Last month's discussion continued a lot about housing, attainable, affordable, whatever you want to call it, but we definitely know that there's an issue with housing in the community. We're definitely looking at what's going on with the project in Diamond Springs to see what will happen there to follow that. There's a lot of discussion continuing about ADUs, additional dwelling units that you can put on your property. You can right now go up to 1,200 square feet, some discussion about 1,600 square feet, manufactured homes, other options. A lot of the more rural areas where you have larger parcels in the county, maybe opportunities for that, but they're still one at a time. So it's going to be hard by people putting ADUs on their property to make that big an impact on the housing needs in the county. Personally, I'm still a believer that we need to look at more concentrated housing like in Diamond Springs, and there are plenty of parcels in the county that are designated for multifamily, and a matter of talking to the parcel owners and seeing why they're not developing their parcels, because they've had them for many, many years, and we know where they are, and they're designated already for that housing, and I think there's a lot of obstacles, and a lot of people are kind of cautiously standing on the sidelines, and this may make a difference in what we see happen in Diamond Springs, and it's throughout the county. We're not talking just in Dorado Hills, we're the biggest part of the population, and as John said, we're also the biggest contributor to the tax base, but that's not our fault. We're right next to Sacramento County, we're a population hub, it's the way it is, but we also have to address the housing needs in the whole county. We'll see. It's taking a lot of focus. One other issue we looked at, give me a moment, Steve, dealing with education. One of the big interests that we try to follow is how to keep 18 to 34-year-olds in our county. And one of the things we've discovered from talking to the high school district and other districts, they do a pretty good job of offering other kind of non-college prep courses. Not so much construction trades, which is one of the things I think we need to do more, but they do have a pretty wide variety of programs for kids who will not be going on to a 4-year university. What we're hearing, some of their stumbling and challenges is the high school staff, the career people are just so busy, they don't have time to really sit down with their students and share this information. So there are some bottlenecks in maybe getting the kids not going to a 4-year or a 2-year college this information, but it's pretty good from what we're seeing. So we'll continue to pursue that. I think the housing is continuing to be a big focus because it's known to be a challenge. We're seeing it. It's with the current governor. There's going to be more that goes on, and it could get trickier for our elected officials to get through some of these things. May get better. We don't know. So I don't really have the answers, but we're asking a lot of questions.
And then Steve had.
Steve, sorry.
One of the things that's going on out there in Diamond Springs, that's right next door practically to Union Mine High School. Union Mine High School roughly has an enrollment on a 1,600 student campus of roughly 800 students. In other words, it's half empty, but it's fully staffed. I've been involved in the county, we're going way back on stuff up there. And believe me, there were plenty of developers trying to develop stuff back in 2002, 3, and 4 who couldn't get their projects approved because people didn't want their community disturbed. They just wanted this perfect high school there, but nothing else. And that's the thing you're having to overcome. Talking to Gallup there today, same thing.
Everywhere.
Okay.
Same challenge with trying to increase sales tax to make our roads better. That's going to be a big challenge. We could get the TOT tax increased on, when it was on the ballot, and that's people from outside the county paying our taxes.
It's going to be an uphill battle to get people from inside the county to think
The
that.
challenge with the tax increase, if I may, is that the county needs to do some good faith stuff. And the good faith thing that they could do is to actually accomplish a public-private partnership where they can tell the taxpayer that we just saved you $800,000 a year on this partnership, but we still need some more money. At least we know that the county is working with the taxpayer.
You're right. There are many areas where you can look at that. I've presented one to the CSD myself. There are plenty of opportunities for that.
Okay, given the hour, we're going to move along. Cindy.
Okay, on to the fun stuff happening in Eldorado Hills. If you guys haven't attended the free concerts on Thursday in Town Center, they're great. You can bring your own food, your own drinks, everything. It's free. It's a wonderful event. So if you haven't been there, you should check it out. At the farmers markets on every Sunday, they're continuing through October 17th. Football season's coming up. We talked about the Trojans earlier in the meeting, and it's a Meet the Trojans event on August 11th at the Town Center. You get to meet the football team, the cheerleaders do their thing, and it's a really fun community event. I haven't ate that, but I guess we might not be having that. The Eldorado Hills, the CSD, the summer concert series continues. There's one in August, and then the final one, September 7th. That's the Saturday night in the park, which is a good event as well with the entertainment. It's got businesses, activities for the kids, food, all kinds of fun things. And the Eldorado Hills CSD, they have their food truck festival that's continuing. On August 21st, they're going to have, in addition to the food trucks, they're also going to be raffling off an 87 Monte Carlo SS. So really neat car. So if you want to have a chance at winning that, I would attend that. And a brand new event. This is in September actually. It's the first annual Eldorado Hills Brew Fest. It's going to be at the Village Green in Toronto. So that's on September 14th from 2 to 6.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to cover the healthy community one very quickly. One of the things that I'm not sure people are aware of is that we have several collaborative courts within El Dorado County, and these are all run by the Superior Court of California. So I'm just going to identify what they are, and then I'm going to talk specifically about the Behavioral Health Court. Some of these courts include Dependency Drug Court, the Juvenile Drug Court, Proposition 36 Drug Court, the Adult Felony Drug Court, the Behavioral Health Court, the Veterans Court, the Family Wellness Court, and I guess that's the full length of them. So El Dorado County, under the state, has several of these special courts that go on, but I want to focus on the Behavioral Health Court in particular. The Behavioral Health Court program targets mentally ill adults and transitional aged youth that have entered the justice system, i.e. they've been arrested or whatever, and the Behavioral Health Court is trying to address the specific needs of those individuals so they don't spend time in jail necessarily, but the rehabilitation happens. So here's the definition. The El Dorado County Behavioral Health Court is an intensive program designed to evaluate, treat, monitor participants while providing coordinated and comprehensive mental health treatment and ancillary services. The Behavioral Health Court program is a strong community collaboration model which provides for system integration. The judicial system, law enforcement, probation, and mental health systems form the Behavioral Health Court team, and a clinical mental health manager works closely with each participant to successfully implement an integrated, individualized service plan that is strengths-based and culturally competent. The Behavioral Health Court team draws on the expertise and mutual commitment of its members and represents a problem-solving approach to address unmet mental health needs. So a lot of people feel that we don't have adequate mental health services, and I'm not saying we do, but we have an awful lot of systems available that people don't recognize they're there and don't utilize. So sometimes you find out that there are some pretty good solutions available if people only knew who to go and approach and how to talk, basically make it happen. This particular one oftentimes works through our probation department, which is why I have the familiarity with the county probation department. Oftentimes refers people to the Behavioral Health Court. But it's one of the many court systems in El Dorado County that are here to provide services other than just keep people in jail. So I think they're all very effective programs if they get the right kind of support. So with that, I'll leave the behavioral health one. So is there any go-backs or any final questions on any of the reports we've had this evening? Okay, just a quick reminder, our next meeting is Monday, September the 9th, same place, same time. And next month's guest speaker will be Rebecca Johnson. She's going to be talking about the El Dorado County Elder and Dependent Adult Abuse Project. So thank you for your attendance. We'll adjourn at this point, and hopefully we'll see you back in September.